So, you want to enter a cosplay competition but have got no idea where to start? Or perhaps you've entered them before and just want some more knowledge into how you can improve your chances of winning? Well, then this is the video for you! Whether you're a complete beginner or you've been entering them for years, this video series is aimed to help you learn more about cosplay competitions and what information you can use to help improve your chances of doing well. Before we get started, this is a disclaimer. You do not need to enter cosplay competitions to be a real cosplayer. You don't need to win cosplay competitions to be a real cosplayer. You don't even need to do that to be a good cosplayer. At the end of the day, cosplay is all about having fun. However, this particular video is for the niche group of people within the cosplay community who love to enter cosplay competitions and want to try and improve their chances of winning. So if that isn't for you, that's completely fine. I'll see you in the next video. Everything in this video is my own opinion from my perspective and experiences that I've been through as a cosplay judge and as a cosplay contestant. As I'm recording this, I have judged 6 competitions and entered 3. One of them I came second, one I came first, and the next one I came runner-up. This video will be split into sections, so you can skip along at the bottom to sections that you deem relevant to information that you want to learn about. I have a list and we're going to be going through everything from types of competitions all the way down to results and asking for feedback. With all that stuff out of the way, let's get right into it. And we're going to start off with the types of cosplay competitions. In case you haven't guessed already by my accent or you don't know me, I'm from England, so a lot of my knowledge is based on British cosplay competitions. However, I have judged international competitions too, so I will be basing a lot of my knowledge around various different things and smooshing it all together. How do you find cosplay competitions? 9 times out of 10, these competitions are going to be held at conventions. So if there's a convention that you'd like to go to, check out their website. I'm sure you'll find that they have a cosplay competition section and you can go on there and follow the instructions on how to sign up, or just have a vague look around and see if there's anything that you're interested in. All conventions are different and some conventions are going to have categories. In these categories, it might be like under 18s, under 16s, or just a general minors section. There might be an inexperienced section. There might be a champions section for people who have won competitions before. There might be one based on craftsmanship. There might be one based on performance. There is loads of different categories that you can enter in some conventions. Not all conventions offer categories. Most of the ones I've judged are primarily just throw everything at the wall and see what sticks, and then there's different prizes. In some competitions, there are also things like group acts and solos. In my experience, most of the time when you enter, there isn't going to be categories over groups and solos, so try not to worry about that too much, but do look into your local conventions and see if they do separate via categories and find out which one is best for you to enter. An important thing to note is that competitions and conventions each have their own set of rules. You can usually find these on the convention's website, but there'll be things like props can't be a certain size or no pyrotechnics, things like that. Most of the time these rules are kind of the same, but I encourage you to go and read a few before you even plan your costume, just in case the thing you want to do is not going to be enterable. Is enterable a word? It is now! Each cosplay competition will have its own set of percentages in which costumes are judged on. I promise it isn't as complicated as it seems. Most of the time you'll find it's split 50-50, 50% performance and 50% craftsmanship. It tends to stay around this mark, usually 60% craftsmanship, 40% performance, or something similar to that. There are, however, some competitions where it's 100% craftsmanship or 100% performance. Though usually the 100% performance ones you can enter with bought costumes. It's just a way of showing off and having fun, you know? And if you're entering 100% craftsmanship ones, do also try and do a performance if you're given stage time to do so, because it can just be a great opportunity for you. There are even some like Insomnia, where here in the UK, I won with my Bennett last year, and the percentages for that are 40% performance, 40% craftsmanship, 15% build book, and 5% character concept. Now you might be asking, what is character concept? Stuff like that is usually down to each judge, so try not to worry about it. It's only ever going to be a very small percentage, if it's even a thing. If you're wondering what a build book is, we're going to be talking about that later, don't worry. But what I'm trying to say is that choosing which competition to enter at which convention can improve or decrease your chances of doing well. Play to your strengths, there's nothing wrong with that. Why not? That's why I like to enter ones with high performance, because I'm good at performing. Next, I'm going to be talking about choosing the right costume to make for a competition, and things to be sure of whilst you're making it. Snack break! But Robin, is choosing which character you want to cosplay an issue? Not at all, but with a cosplay competition, it's advantageous to be able to show off different techniques and skills within the craft. It is a competition after all. Reminder that this is something I'm saying from my perspective and experience. You are welcome to enter any costume that you have made into a competition. Again, this video series is just to help you improve your chances of winning, that's all. You don't have to follow any of this advice, just pick and choose which bits work best for you. Let's start with choosing the right character. Judges will be looking for techniques used and how they are done. So if you choose a costume like a school uniform, for example, and it's mainly just sewing and there's not much else to it, it doesn't give the judges much to go on. But let's take this simple school uniform costume and give you an example of how it could be more technical. You could have come up with the pattern from scratch. You could have hand-dyed parts of the fabric. There could be various different materials used for it. Everything could be lined, hemmed, and top-stitched perfectly. And most importantly, it could look 100% accurate to the reference picture. If you're going to do something like that, then that is showing technique. This would be as opposed to buying a pre-made pattern and just sewing it up and then boom, jobs are good. You've only then shown one technique that you can sew a pre-made pattern. But if you did the other things I just suggested, that's more techniques. Now let's look at something a little bit more complicated. I'm going to walk you through my Bennett. The bags are made out of either warbler or foam and wrapped in fabric. Not only that, but the bags are usable and the inside of them is nice and crisp too. I use top stitching and hand stitching along the edges of different parts of the costume. I patterned everything myself, though some parts have seen better days and need some repair. The vision is 3D printed with resin. Parts of it, like the belt, were sculpted out of foam clay, wrapped in warbler, sanded for hours to get the perfect finish. Some parts I've made of material called Sintra for stability. Other parts I sculpted out of clay, made a silicone mold of, and then used either resin or rubber for the costume, depending on where they were going. On top of that, there is heat transfer vinyl, there is twill, there is faux suede, there is cotton, there is leather. There is a massive range of different materials within this costume. And I get to say that I've done all of that in prejudging. Don't worry, there is a section on prejudging. But these are things to keep in mind when choosing a character. While Bennett can seem quite simple as a character, there is lots of different details and techniques used throughout the entire costume to showcase my skills. I also made this costume with comfort and performance in mind. These little bits by the armpits here were made out of rubber so that they wouldn't dig in whilst I moved my arms. This part on the front, detachable with magnets. Means I can get the shirt on and off nice and easy. This bag is detachable with Velcro, but it also has extra strong magnets behind it so that it doesn't come off whilst I'm performing. At the back here, I could have cast this section out of rubber as well. However, when I sit down, I want to be able to lean back. So this is instead foam wrapped in fabric so that it's comfortable when I lean back. It's little things like that that really help make a difference, especially if you talk about them in prejudging, because it shows that you've put care and thought into planning your character. Well, planning your costume, you know what I mean. So when picking a character, make sure that you are picking one that has lots of different techniques that you can use, is something you can perform in, is something comfortable to be worn for a long period of time, and something that you're gonna have fun making. That's the most important one. It can seem a bit daunting to look at that list and be like, which one am I gonna pick? Believe me, I know. Why do you think I've not put that much time into making anything since Bennett? I'm waiting for a new hyperfixation. There is one thing to keep in mind though. Just having more techniques does not make your costume better. You need to have these techniques done well. It is better to have fewer techniques done great than more techniques done Choosing the right fabric for the character is also a good way to get some extra points in the judges' room. So long as you have a valid reason for choosing your fabric, you can pretty much go with what you want. For example, you notice a large part of my costume is faux suede. This is because I'm autistic and textures really freak me out on some fabrics. Faux suede photographs beautifully and it has depth, but it's also really soft. So if I'm stressed out before a competition, weird as it sounds, I can just stroke the fabric and calm myself down. I also then don't have any horrible feeling fabrics against my skin, making it much harder for myself. The last thing we want is a meltdown before a competition. And again, like I said, I use rubber for comfort and flexibility, etc, etc. Go with what works for you. It doesn't always have to be character accurate. Obviously we are striving for accuracy here, so get it as close as you can within your own comfort. Say you were making a warrior, for example. You could use leather because that's what they would have used at the time. Basically, think of it like GCSE art. So long as you have a valid explanation for why you chose that fabric, it's completely fine. Now I'm going to be talking about the things you need to keep an eye out for whilst you're making the costume. I even wrote a list of things that we look for, so let's go through it, shall we? Neat seams. We will flip those edges to see what they look like underneath. Clean edges, making sure the top stitching is neat and even. Are there any glue stains on it? If there's a pattern in the material, does it line up? Another good one is it lined? You don't need to line your costumes, but it's great to get extra points. Just be like, yeah, it's fully lined, and let them see the lining. If it's a proper armor, is it sanded? Is it primed? Is it weathered? Seriously, my biggest pet peeve as a judge is when you see something that's incredibly big and impressive, but they didn't even prime the foam before painting it. This means the paint will be chipping off in places and it won't have an even application and a nice finish. Hell, even top coat it with a gloss or matte just for a perfect finish. And please, 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 for the love of God, sand it. Please sand it. Sanding is a pain, yes, but it's something that really elevates your costume, and it's worth the extra hour's work, honestly. Especially if you are stacking multiple layers of foam to make a thicker structure, where they are lined and sandwiched between. I don't want to be able to see that. Fill your seams, sand it, prime it, paint it, weather it, top coat it. Yeah? Whilst making your costume, make sure you are constantly looking at reference pictures. Before you even start making it, take some time to gather reference pictures of your image. Reference images are just basically what you are looking to achieve. For example, this is my Bennett costume next to a reference picture of the Bennett costume. Since it's a competition, make sure you are getting your costume as accurate to the reference picture as possible. This can only help to improve your chances of winning, especially in international competitions. The more that you do yourself from scratch, the more impressive it is in the judging room. And once again, as you're making it, be sure of the competition's rules so that you know you're not making anything too big to even be allowed on stage. Make sure you take photos of everything. It is better to have too many photos than too few. As a judge, I'd love to see photos of you coming up with the pattern, patterning it, lining it, any little intimate details that you want to show us. Anything that you think might be hidden from eye but is worth seeing, take photos of it. You're documenting it so that people know that you've actually made it and you've not just bought or commissioned it from someone. Now that we've done those things, it's time to move on to your build book. But Robin, what on earth is a build book? I got you, my dude, don't worry. A build book is just a name for compiling photos and text about how you made your costume. I highly recommend doing this online and making a digital portfolio, as things are very digital nowadays and require you to submit them online for competitions before the event. Some cons require a build book, some don't, and some just require progress pictures as proof that you've made it. It is, however, best practice to have one because you can always show up with a printed out physical copy to show the judges on the day. And if it's a convention that doesn't require a build book, that will get you extra points, trust me. It doesn't need to be anything fancy, just lay it out all nicely, make sure it's aesthetically pleasing, and I'm gonna give you some tips for making the best build book that you can make. It's time for Rose Magpie's tips and tricks with a build book. Number 1, don't fill it with text. It may be tempting to be very wordy with the descriptions of what you've done to make the costume. However, the judges are going to be experienced in a lot of these techniques. You don't need to go into depth. I also don't want to read your entire life story as to why you chose the paint color that you did. If there is a significant reason that you want to put in there for why you chose something, do so, but try to keep it to 1 or 2 sentences maximum. Next, include references side-by-sides with your work. The judges aren't always going to know the character that you're cosplaying, so it's great practice in your build book to have a photo of the character next to a photo of your finished costume. This way, as judges, we can look and see just how accurate it is, like spot the difference. You can even go the extra step and do like I did with my Bennett build book and put side-by-sides of each individual piece. Which leads me on to my next point. Please include a picture of your finished costume. I've read so many build books that have progress pictures of the costume being made, but then nothing of the full costume at the end. Judges see a lot of costumes in a very short amount of time, and it is really helpful to us if you please include a full picture of your costume in the build book, the finished piece, please. Lastly, and the most important one, don't include anything negative. As tempting as it can be to be like, I made a mistake here, I know I made this mistake, I know how to fix it next time, don't do it. It's a competition. You're meant to be selling yourself here. The prejudging window is so small that sometimes we will not even notice where you've gone wrong. So unless you point it out to us, we're not gonna see it. So yeah, don't mention it. Some competitions also do judge your build books, so making sure you have it nice, neat, and organized is 10 out of 10, good idea. Important things to make note of in the build book is techniques you used and what materials you've used. For ease of reading and skimming through, you can even highlight certain sections that you want the judges to notice. Be sure to point out anything of interest and anything you think that they might miss. Now I'm going to show you a few cool ways that you can make your own build book. For the record, none of these are sponsored. There are websites and apps like Canva. I generally just use Photoshop or Illustrator. You could even use something like Vistaprint and get them to print it for you as a finished book. For my Bennett build book, I even did it on a mixture of Photoshop and Word. It doesn't need to be anything fancy. For my Bennett as well, I also made a personal scrapbook just to keep for myself, and I ended up handing that over to the judges at Insomnia when I went so that they could see, and that was just handwritten. There are so many ways that you can do this, just have fun with it and try and make it look nice and neat and tidy and presentable, and somewhat organized. But yeah, so that's a build book. You're basically taking the progress pictures that you took, putting them all in a book, explaining a little bit about it, and showing it to the judges. It's time for my favorite part, the performance. Now, in case you can't tell, I was a stressed out theatre kid. My mother put me in amateur dramatics at the ripe old age of 5 or 6, I believe. She was like, "You will get confidence, my child. You will, and you will thank me." And thank her I did, because confidence I did gain. Did it really just teach me to mask? A little bit, but you know what? Fake it till you make it. The confidence eventually came. And while confidence is a huge part of your performance, there are many other aspects that go into it too, and that's what I'm here to help you with. Hopefully, at this point, you've chosen a character that you feel comfortable and confident performing in. But whether you do or don't worry, because that's what I'm here for. I once again have made a list, in case you couldn't tell that I have a terrible memory. And this list is what I and others look for when they're judging performances. To start with, did the audio have any editing at all? For example, was it just a song, or did they do some sort of editing to add voice lines in, or just have multiple different songs in there, something like that? Or was there even anything of note, like they voiced the character themselves? An important one for me and a lot of judges when watching is, did they make good use of the space on stage? Try to plan a performance that doesn't involve you staying in one position or one area of the stage. Sometimes conventions are going to have a huge space for you to work with. Use that space, make the most of it. Another important thing is, how were their facial expressions? Did they show what they were feeling? The expressions need to be readable from the audience. It's okay to be a little larger than life. Stage acting is completely different to TV and movie acting. Could you tell if they were feeling shocked? For example, you might be able to tell that I was feeling shocked on camera like this if I go, but will that translate well to the audience? You also need to keep in mind how your character acts. So for example, as Bennett from Genshin Impact, as well as being expressive in my face, I can use my body language. I can use the kind of emotes that they do. So for example, shocked in Bennett might be like that. You can practice these things easily in front of a mirror or record yourself and watch it back. You might feel a little cringy at first, but honestly, it's gonna be on stage. You need to be able to see it. Hell, film it from a distance and see if you can see the emotions from as far away as your camera is. But what if your character has a mask? Body expressions. We should still be able to understand how the character is feeling by how you morph and move your body. Let me show you another example. Say I was feeling rage. Something like that. But if I had a mask on, this isn't going to be shown. So let's try it again with a mask. For example, this was the rage I did before. You can't really tell, so you need to over-exaggerate your movements. So to show rage with a mask, for example, I could go something like that. Get back on that head. Whew. Okay. Something else we're not really going to be looking out for, but we will be able to notice, is if something has gone wrong. Now keep in mind, the judges do not know your performance. So most of the time, we're not gonna know if anything's gone wrong. But say for example, part of your costume breaks or your wig falls off. As silly as it sounds, ignore it and keep going. Judges are cosplayers as well, and we understand how heartbreaking it is for something we've worked so long on, breaking, especially on stage in front of loads of people. But it happens. And I can promise you that everyone is nothing but supportive when it does. Just act through it. Wait for the lights to go down, or when you leave stage, a member of staff will grab it for you and bring it to you. The show must go on, as they say, but so long as you do your best to act through it, most of the time the judges aren't going to mark you down for it. Another thing I like to see is there props on stage, and if so, did they interact with them? There is no point to having props on stage that you do not interact with. It's all well and good setting a scene. You don't have to interact with everything that you put up there, but there needs to be a reason for it being there. Just give us some interaction, you know? Another important one is, how accurate was your performance to the character? Not all competitions care about this, not all judges care about this, but most of the ones I do, they've cared. So in some ways that's staying true to the character. This doesn't necessarily mean you need to be canon with the performance you've created. At CosExpo earlier this year, someone did Link trying to go through airport security. Now, is that something Link has done? No. But they stayed in character the whole time, the interactions had were very accurate to the character, and overall you walked away from it thinking, yeah, that is how Link would react in that situation. And with that comes a very important thing. If I didn't know the character, would I still be able to understand your performance? The chances are every judge isn't going to know the character that you are doing. And there is no way that everyone in the audience will also know what you're doing. So it's important to not be too close-minded with your script and keep in mind that some people are going to have no idea what you're cosplaying. It should still be understandable to them. For example, with Bennett, I always talk about his bad luck in the script so that people in the audience know that he's really unlucky. With any performance, it should invoke emotion, whether that's making people laugh, making them feel unnerved, making them feel scared, happy, anything really. I want my attention to be grabbed. I want to be able to be absorbed into this world that you are bringing us into by watching you perform. And lastly, a performance is also about seeing how well you can move in the costume. Because I'm telling you now, if 2 armor builds went up there, one guy was moving like a robot and the other guy was doing something that involved a lot of movement, the one that did a lot of movement would get more points for their performance because they thought about their performance in the making of their costume. With all these things in mind, writing a performance that incorporates all of this can be a bit daunting, especially with some of the time limits that we're given to perform. My shortest performance to try and fit all of this in was 1 minute 15 seconds. In that performance, I tried to do all of the above and tell a complete story, all within 1 minute 15 seconds. I managed it, but whew, it was a stretch. Just remember, you don't have to tick all of these boxes, and most of them are just small and easy things to do. For example, if you don't want to use your own voice, that's completely fine, but you can make your own track by editing in voice lines that you want to use. If you are recording with your own voice, please make sure that there is no microphone pops and the audio isn't super low quality. It might sound okay coming out of your phone or out of your laptop, but when it's blasted on speakers to a big audience, it's going to be really noticeable. Also, be sure to speak clearly so that everybody can understand you. Sometimes your language might not be the first language of the judges, so you want to make sure that you're enunciating your words correctly. All of these things help make a great performance. I'll also put a link to my other performances in the description as well. But yeah, that's pretty much it for the performance side of competitions. I just want to run through some advice I have for packing your costume to take to the competition. Personally, I like to store my competition costumes in those big plastic tubs. This is so they won't get damaged during traveling or storage, but it does depend on how you are getting there. If, for example, you're taking public transport, that really isn't a good option, so try getting a hard shell suitcase instead. Stuff and bubble wrap everything you think is breakable. And also pack things you might need if something breaks. This could be anything from a soldering iron and solder to a hot glue gun. A needle and thread is always a good call too. Also, please bring an iron or a steamer. Please, you'll thank me. So, what should you do before you go into prejudging? Or hell, before you even leave the hotel room? First, make sure any repairs that need doing are done. Second, please, please, please iron or steam your costume. If you're going into prejudging with a wrinkly costume, it will count against you. Personally, I prefer to take a steamer because I don't trust myself ironing. I always worry that I'm going to burn the costume. You can get really cheap clothes steamers for like 20 quid. And honestly, the investment is so worth it. Not just for wig styling, but for making sure your costumes aren't creased and wrinkly. Okay, so you've got to the con. What now? If you signed up to the competition beforehand, then they'll probably have told you exactly where to go. But if not, it doesn't hurt to ask a member of staff working there where you need to go. The cosplay staff section will usually have given you a time slot that you need to be there for your prejudging. If there is a mirror, make sure you give yourself a full once over in it. If not, use your phone. Make sure that your wig hair isn't too messy from the journey to the con. Make sure everything is sat in the right place. And also go through your build book and refresh your memory on the things that you want to talk about when you're in there. If you've not already been told, you can talk to the organisers to find out how long you will have to communicate with the judges. It usually ranges from 2 to 4 minutes, it can be longer if you're in a group. And plan what it is that you want to say. It's your turn, you're entering the room, what happens now? If you brought your build book, hand it to one of the judges, and then once you are told your time has started, talk top to bottom or bottom to top. Going this way, make sure that you do not miss any part of your costume and it's much easier to get your thoughts organised. If you submitted the Buildbook online before the con, then sometimes the judges before prejudging or after prejudging will go through the Buildbook themselves. So don't feel disheartened if they don't go through the Buildbook you gave them at the prejudging. They probably just want to use that time to look at the actual costume in front of them. Also, be sure to get your book back afterwards. Mention the things that are in your Buildbook, what materials you used, any techniques you used. If there's something complicated that you're proud of, mention that. It's going to be very hard, but try not to get stressed. But if you do, don't worry, most people that do prejudging get stressed. Hell, I've judged more competitions than I've entered, and I always get stressed with prejudging. I've said it once and I'll say it again, do not mention anything negative on your costume. The judges might not notice it. Whilst you're talking, the judges might circle you like sharks to check out your costume. Honestly, I kind of enjoy this bit because I'm like, yeah, look at all this I made, look at the back of it. I worked so hard on the back and no one ever sees the back. Look at the back of the costume. Look at the back of the costume. It's so much more fun than the front. Most of the time they will be flipping seams, having a look at parts of your costume, touching it, feeling the fabrics, and looking for anything that might be like lined or something they've seen in your Buildbook that they want more information on. Sometimes judges ask questions, sometimes they're silent. It varies. But if they do have questions, be sure to answer them best you can. It is normal to forget things and not mention them, don't worry. The judges are cosplayers too and will see what you have done and they will understand. If you did any voice acting in your performance, now's a great time to mention that. And it'll be over before you know it. I'm going to walk you through a couple of my costumes right now to show you what I would be looking out for as a judge. Some negatives, some positives, and we'll go from there. So as a judge, I would be lifting these areas. I would be flipping seams and making sure that everything is neat and tidy under here, like so. I would be making sure that these parts all lined up with each other. Some judges would have a go at that because this bit is a smaller distance than here, but most judges wouldn't notice it. So I'm pointing it out right now because I know the flaws in my own design. But if I choose not to mention this, they might not notice it. So like a bit here, if they lifted up this and saw this bit, they might be like, that's okay. But if they looked at this bit, they might be like, oh, that's not so good. Parts of note is all the neat top stitching along the edges of everything. And I mean everything, even along these bits here. However, this part, you can see the lining based on where it sits. You can see a glue stain here and a glue stain here. These are deductible points. Or at least not as many points. Everything on my costume is weathered right down to these parts here. And if you come down here and flip it, you'll see the seams are very nice and neat even underneath. This is extra points. This bag was the first thing I made of my old Bennett. So it is very old and my skills have gotten so much better since this. And I am not happy with it at all. Like, it is decent, don't get me wrong. I have improved it. However, the edges on this, where I wrapped the foam in fabric, are not neat at all. This is clearly just cut out and stuck on there, so it doesn't have much realism. The same goes for these parts, just very messy overall. It looks handmade, you know? It's great, and it does the job. The map is great, however, I am not happy with the quality of this bag, and I will redo it at some point if I feel the need. But again, I am just giving you examples of what judges might look for, and it depends per judge. Some judges just care more about some things than others based on their own experience, and that's perfectly fine. For example, this is my Barbie Fairytopia costume. I will never be entering this in a competition because I'm not happy with the quality of it. I also did not make the wings, so I wouldn't be getting any points for that. It would just be the corset and skirt. That isn't technical enough for me to want to enter it in a competition. But let me show you why I wouldn't want to enter this in a competition. For starters, this bit here just does not sit properly. Can you see how it falls down there and doesn't go up because this bit's sewn here? And it's got these lines going across it here from where it doesn't sit nicely, so I don't like that. I hate the edging I did on this. It's so fluffy and not very nice at all to look at. However, some good things of note is if they flip my petals, everything is lovely and neat.
And there is airbrushing skills used to create the designs on the petals like veins, which I really like. It is also a boned corset. All the boning is hidden in the lining, so you don't see the boning channels. When it comes to foam work, for example, let's look at this Wanderer's hat. Now for clarity here, I did not make this. This is from AliExpress, but you can see the foam joins of the layers. And this is what I mean when I talk about wanting these seams hidden. Ideally, you should put some quick seal or something like that down there. There are plenty of tutorials online for hiding seams, and you can sand the hell out of that so that the surface is not as rough, because this is, I don't know if you can hear that. That is really rough. So I'd want that to be as smooth as everything else is on top so that it all blends in.
But yeah, that's prejudging, and honestly, for me, it's one of the scariest parts of competing. But now that that's out of the way, you can focus on your performance, having fun, and seeing what the results are gonna be. Prejudging is over, you can breathe a sigh of relief. And usually that sigh of relief will come with the need for a drink, the need for food, and a bathroom break. Get all those things done. Usually you have enough time between prejudging and the performance to get them done. Hydrate or die straight, that's what I always say. The key is moderation. Don't eat too much to be sick, don't drink too much to pee yourself, and don't spend all day on the toilet. Also, if you can find somewhere quiet to just stick headphones in and go over the audio a few times to refresh in your head the performance beforehand, do that. You can never get too much practice. As for the performance, I will be reiterating some of the tips I said in the planning of your performance, so bear with me if it seems a bit repetitive. See earlier on in the video on planning and writing your performance for what the judges are looking for whilst you're performing. If you're nervous, take a deep breath. When you're up there, most of the time, I can guarantee you will not see their faces. Especially if it's a big stage with lights, all you're gonna see is lights and blur. If you're still nervous about it, or it's a small convention without the big lights and you can see the audience, look over the top of their heads. They taught me that in drama school, it really helped. When performing, especially if lip syncing, try to keep your chin up so the audience can see your face, because it's much easier to understand what someone is saying when they are facing you than if they're like this, because you still know what they're saying, but like if they're like this, it's a lot harder to communicate. Understand? Especially when on stage. Just have fun with it, become the character. And once again, if anything goes wrong, just act through it. The judges don't know your performance, they don't know what's gone wrong. That said, if something breaks, just act through it. We will only know something's gone wrong if it shows on your face. Say you're performing and you do this when you were meant to do this. If your face goes, that shows us that you've made a mistake. But if you just steer into it, we're not even gonna know that it was meant to be anything different. You're fine. Once your turn is over and you're off stage, waiting can be nerve-wracking. I like to use this time to chat to my fellow competitors. Everyone back there loves crafting. You can share with your love of costumes, learn new techniques, and make new friends. Be sure to get a drink of water too, you'll definitely need it after performing. And then yeah, all that's left is the results. Just know that whatever the results are, it doesn't make you any worse or better of a cosplayer. Sometimes the winners are down to judges' personal preference of what techniques were used. Sometimes a costume that doesn't look impressive has a lot of detail work that's gone into it that is only seen in their build book. It can be really, really hard not to compare yourself to other people, but you never know what someone's life is like. And try not to be too hard on yourself if you don't win anything, okay? There is no losers in cosplay competitions, as cheesy as it sounds. Competitions are amazing to win, but it's not just about winning. It's about getting up on stage, showing off what you can create with other like-minded people and having fun. We all have the same passion after all. Now the competition's over. Is that it? Well, if you enjoyed this experience and it's something you think you'd want to do again, go ask the judges for feedback. Keep in mind, not all judges will want to do this, but a lot of us are more than happy to help out. However, I will blanket this with a disclaimer. Do not go and get feedback from the judges if it's going to make you upset with them. If you think you can't handle constructive criticism, then please do not go to the judges for feedback. It is not necessary, you do not need feedback, but feedback can help you grow and improve. It's always good to have an experienced eye go over your costume and point out the parts that you can improve on. Even if it isn't something that you can improve on this already made costume, it is something that you can remember to do for your next costume. We learn more by failure than we do succeeding. And I'm not gonna lie to you, feedback can hurt. Hell, when I won with Bennett, I went to the judges for feedback anyway because I knew my craftsmanship level is not where I want it to be yet. They gave me some great feedback on what I could do to improve my costume, and it still hurt, and I still found myself getting defensive. And I'd won. At the end of the day, you just need to take a step back and try to think about things critically, especially from a judge's perspective. As harsh as it sounds, the judges are there to look at what is impressive in your costume and find the faults. They are just doing their job, and it is a very, very hard job to do. Sometimes the tiniest thing can make a difference between placing and not, so having as much knowledge as possible can really benefit you in future competitions. I personally do not like to give feedback via DMs after the competition, so if anyone's been judged by me, please come to me after the competition in the costume you are wearing so that I can visualize it and see it and point it out, otherwise I'll be unable to do so. It's also really hard to get across what I'm trying to say in the written text, and it can feel a lot harsher in written text than it can in person. And I'm not out here trying to upset anybody, I just want to help. The same goes for all judges. But let's say you've won a competition. Now I'm going to talk to you about something called sandbagging. Sandbagging is basically when you win a competition with that costume and then you take that costume and enter it in multiple competitions to keep winning again and again and again, all with the same award-winning costume. I think sandbagging is a nicer way of saying dick move, basically. In my opinion, if you win a competition, you're more than okay to enter that costume into, say, an international competition where it's a different level. By international competitions here, I mean like selectionals. There'll be certain competitions held in each country, and if you win the one in your country, you can then go on to be a representative for your country at another convention where all the winners from all over the world all go and compete with their winning costumes. That's fine. Again, this is just my opinion. But say, for example, you won that international selectionals with the costume, and then you take that costume and enter it in like a small local convention. Kind of feels a little sandbaggy to me. Decide what works best for you and go from there, but keep in mind other people's feelings as you do so. Going back to Bennett, he won I-69 and was a runner-up in ECG, so I have officially retired him now from competitions. To wrap all of this up nicely, here's an extra little tip that is often overlooked. Follow crafting accounts on social media. There are loads of creators out there that sole focus is showing you how they make things. You can learn so much just from looking at their photos, or if they make any mini tutorials. Very, very handy. But lastly, I'm going to get to the FAQs. But lastly, I asked on my Instagram, what questions do you have about cosplay competitions? Most of them I covered in this video, but here are two that I would love to answer that I feel aren't talked about enough in the community. Question 1. Do judges prefer big, fancy, complicated costumes like armor and dresses? Well, here's the thing, the audience tend to prefer that, but judges are always looking at quality over size. It's not about how big it is, it's about what you do with it. If you saw a really big, impressive armor or ball gown from the audience, you might be like, whoa, yeah, that's incredible. Oh, screw all the other ones, this guy's clearly won, right? But the judges will get to see it up close. They'll get to see the build book. They'll get to see all of the little intricate things on how it was made. If this guy didn't prime his armor, there is no sanding or anything like that, or it's just foam armor, there's nothing else, even the undersuit they just bought, then it's not going to get as many points. It's that simple. Same for things like dresses. It's not the size of the costume or how impressive it looks due to that. It's about how cleanly and how professionally everything is done. And question number 2. Can you enter a gender bend OC or own design of an existing character? Yeah, go for it. There's no reason you can't. However, I will say reference pictures are a huge part of cosplay competitions. Most of the time with cosplay competitions as judges, we are looking at reference pictures. So if you are making this out of your head, we have nothing to go off to judge you against. Some cosplay competitions also have cosplay accuracy as a percentage. So if you don't give us a reference picture for us to work off whether your costume's accurate or not, especially if it's an original design, we just can't give you points for that. It's honestly something that's really hard to judge. So can you do it? Absolutely, of course you can. Would I recommend it? Yeah. You very rarely see OCs win cosplay competitions, and a large chunk of that is because you never know as a judge whether the reference picture was drawn after the costume was finished. It can be really finicky. I have seen gender bends win before. We've judged one and had them win. It was a bleach one. It was incredible. The costumes were just spectacular. But yeah, just play it by ear and make sure that you do it incredibly well and have reference pictures, and you should be absolutely fine. But yeah, that about wraps it up for my series. I really hope that this series was informative and helped you. Please feel free to share it with anyone who's thinking about entering a cosplay competition to help them. And if you've been here from the beginning to the end, then wow, thanks very much. Make sure to leave some likes, some comments, and subscribe if you aren't already. I hope to see you all in the next video that I do. Bye guys.